Hello everyone, my name is Brittany Classens. Welcome back to another information visualization tutorial. This is week 3. We have a lot to get through today, so we're just going to jump right into it.
Just like last week, we're going to start off with a quote, which reads, "Finding the right visual method is only half the battle. Providing context, showing our own uncertainty, offering some narrative and guidance are all things that are critical to augmenting a user experience and understanding. If we want to improve the visual data literacy of our audience, we are responsible for providing those things." So last week we introduced you to Excel by showing you the assignment 1 data set. So we thought that because that is such a large data set that we will give you a tutorial on the very basics of Excel. So stay tuned. Alrighty guys, the first thing we're going to do is, before we do anything else, we're going to format this data set. Okay, so as you can see, there is 5 columns of data, but it's really hard to distinguish what is the actual data and what is the title of each column. So this tip that I'm going to show you is it's better for normally bigger data sets, but I'm just going to show you anyway. So if I say, for example, I really like this bold and italic effect on song title, but I want it for artist, place, streams, and country as well, what I would do is I would highlight the cell by just clicking on it, and see this little paintbrush up here. I would click that, and then what I'm going to do is click what I want it to change to and drag it across, and then release my trackpad or mouse, and then it's the same. This is really helpful again for bigger sets of data, maybe not so much smaller sets, but I think it's just a good little tip anyway. So now what I'm going to do is I really want to implement something called conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is a feature in many spreadsheet applications such as Google Sheets or Excel that allows you to apply specific formatting to cells that meet certain criteria. It is most often used as a color-based formatting to highlight, emphasize, or differentiate amongst data and information stored in a spreadsheet. Okay, so in this example, I want to visually see the hierarchy of these streams. So what's the biggest amount of streams and what's the least amount of streams? So what I'm going to do is highlight the portion that I want conditional formatted. So I don't want the title, I just want the data set. And then up here, I'm going to press conditional formatting. Now I'm going to click the arrow, and then there's so many different options you can choose from, okay? But for this case, I'm going to click color scales. And then I think this one with the green and the red is pretty nice. So I'm going to click that. And as you can see, the most green WAP by Cardi B has 716 million streams, so that's the greenest of the lot. And then Cherub by Ballpark Music only has 4 million streams, so it is bright red. And then there's a scale for the rest of the songs. You can change this any way you like. You can even specify different colors, but this is also just a really good tool to be able to instantly see what is max and what is minimum, or whatever you specify your conditional formatting to be. I'm also wanting to conditional format the country, and I want it to bold Australian artists because we really love Australian music here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, it's not really one of the options here. So what I'm going to do is make a new rule, and I'm going to go to this one and click classic. And then I'm going to do only format cells that contain, and then I'm going to type in Australia. And then I don't really want it to be red, but I want to customize. And then I just want it to be bold, okay? And I press OK. And as you can see, only the Australian artists are bolded, okay? So that is basically an introduction to conditional formatting. Now what we want to do is add some formulas. I want to be able to see the average of streams, the total number of streams, the most and least streamed in a way that is not by color. So Excel has this really nifty feature called formulas, where you can do some sort of math equation and it will produce the answer to that really quickly and really easily. Okay, and there's a few ways to do it, but I'm just going to teach you the easiest way, or what I think is the easiest way for now. But again, there are a lot of different ways to write your formulas, so I would highly recommend having a fiddle, having a go, and seeing what you prefer. So the first thing I want to do is see how many million streams there are altogether, okay? So when you're writing a formula, I always like to consider, before I write it, I like to say to myself, this cell is. So this cell is, well, it's equal to the sum, okay? And we write sum, S-U-M, and then we want to say, well, what is it actually adding, or what is the sum going to be? So we use our brackets, and you could either write, say so this is D4. So I want the first bit of the sum to be D4, and then we separate it by a colon, and I want the ending of the sum to be D13. Another way you can do it, right, instead of typing, is you can get it and you can drag it. So that might be a bit better if you have larger data sets, okay? So then I'm going to close off that bracket and just hit return. And as you can see, it's done the sum of the total number of Spotify streams, which is, I don't even know, a really big number in the millions. And now what I want to do is get the average of those. So similar to the sum, I say to myself, this cell is equal to, and then I put average, and then again I'm going to drag the data, so it's D4 to D13, and click enter, and the average is 138.4 million streams, which is quite a lot of streams, I would say. So now what I want to do is I want to teach you a quicker way to autofill your data, or autofill your formulas. So if you want to quickly find the average, quickly find the sum, there is a better way to do it. So I'm just going to delete what I have already, and I'm going to highlight the data that I want calculated. And then do you see this symbol here? This is the auto sum symbol. So if I click the arrow, there is so many different autofill options that I can choose from. So I just want an auto sum. And as again, it does the same thing. It calculates all those numbers and gives me the sum. Same if I wanted the average, okay? So if I'm going to go average, it's going to do the same thing. Now, if I want the minimum of the data set, it's the same as the sum and the average. So I go, this cell is equal to, then I want to type in for the maximum, for example, max. And then I'm going to drag. And hopefully it should tell me that WAP by Cardi B, which is the 716 million streams, is the maximum. But let's have a look. Yep, it sure does. That is great. Now I want to say the minimum. So then again, this cell is equal to min. And then I'm going to drag it again, and it should tell me that Cherub by Ballpark Music with 4 million streams is the least. That is right. I'm just going to give it some formatting, put it in the center like the others, and there we go. That tells me the sum, the average, the maximum, and the minimum values. There are a lot of different formulas you can use. Another option, instead of writing it in the cell, is to write it up here. And again, if you start typing, it will try to autofill to what they think you're using. So there is a lot of different ones that you could explore, and I highly recommend you having a look at what ones might suit your data. But these are the basic 4 that I always use. I don't tend to use a lot of other things, but you might. So I would really, again, encourage you to explore. So I'm just going to remove those for the time being. What did I do? Oops, let's just fix that and delete those. So now I'm back to just the basic table that just has the conditional formatting and the country formatting. But what I want to do is if I have a larger set of data, say if I have 100 rows, and I want to filter and organize and see only a particular setting. For example, I only want to see Australian artists. There is a handy tool called the filter tool. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the areas which I want filtering. And then I'm going to press this button here, sort and filter, and then I'm going to press filter. And as you can see, little drop downs appear under each title. So for example, if I only want to see Australian artist, I can go onto this little drop down, deselect all, only select Australia, and then you can see that only the Australian artists appear. Okay, so then I'll select back if I want to get rid of the Australian artist, then only the USA and the Great Britain will appear. Okay? So that is a really good way to organize your data, specifically if you have a lot of data cells that you want to organize. Another really handy tool that I think you guys would benefit from in your assignment, because it is such a large data set, is what is called freeze panes. Now, freeze panes is a way to freeze a certain row or column of your data. So when you scroll either horizontal or vertically, it freezes. Okay, so when you're trying to search for a particular cell in your data, it's really hard to having to scroll and not knowing what, for example, 10 is. Or what is 10 again? Is it number of streams? Is it the place in a list? I don't know, because then I have to scroll all the way back up to see what the actual heading was, and it just gets confusing. So a good way to do that is to use a freeze pane. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight what you want freezed below. So for example, if I want this row frozen, I'm going to highlight this row. Okay, and then in the view ribbon on your Excel, I am going to click freeze panes. So then that puts a line above what I've selected. And now when I scroll, it is always there. So I can see what this place would be, what this number of stream would be, etc. Okay? So there is only one more thing that I want to show you, and is probably the most relevant tool for you in your assignments, is how to make a graph. There are a lot of different ways to make a graph in Excel. Again, I am probably going to teach you the easiest way, but feel free to explore other options if you don't like the way that I'm teaching you. So what I'm going to do is, if I want a simple graph, just say I want the artist and the streams. I want that in the graph. I don't want the whole table. I just want to graph the artist and the streams they have. I'm just going to highlight that section. So using my command key, highlight artists and streams, and then I'm going to hit Alt or Option and F1. Okay, and then that automatically gives me a graph based off those streams. So I'm just going to move it around so you can see it better. Cool. So now we have this graph. Now, if I just want to do some quick editing, because you might want to create your graph in something like Infogram later on, but you just want to be able to see the options right now. What I'm going to do is hit chart design ribbon and have a look at the quick layout option. And there's so many different options you can choose. I might like this one, but this one's alright, but it just doesn't really make sense. So the key doesn't really make sense. The axis could be improved. So what I'm going to do now is click this one up here called switch row and column, which again organizes the data more effectively. So they're the songs represented by a key and the streams on the y-axis. Now there are a lot of other different options you can do. This is not, obviously, by last week's tutorial, this is not the most effectively designed column or bar graph. So it'll be up to you to try to improve that, okay? But if you wanted to have a quick edit, you can always edit the actual typograph itself. So maybe I want to change it to a pie, but again, switching rows and columns. And it tells me in the form of a pie graph stream, the streams count. That still might not be the right graph for you. So maybe I want something like a back to this and then switching it again. Who knows? It's up to you to decide, but that is how you quickly insert a graph. Another option is to edit the style. So there's a lot of different formatting options that you can choose from. This one's quite nice, but again, you can't really see the key, so we have to change it by clicking the formatting. There we go. Cool, so that is it for my pretty much very basic Excel rundown. Next week we'll be diving into deeper on how to do more advanced stuff with Excel, but this should really get you started for today's tutorial. So now that we have watched this video, you should have a basic understanding on some of the tips and tricks that you could use to make your Excel life a lot easier. So for this activity, there is a data set on Canvas which outlines all the weather patterns in Sydney from 2011 to 2017. So if you download that off Canvas, that's what we'll be using for this week. So using the tips taught in the video, have a go at implementing the following options to the data set. You could use conditional formatting, have a go at not just color or bold, see if you can experiment, use formulas, try and see about other formulas that weren't in the video, have a go at filtering, freeze panes, and also make at least 3 graphs. Okay, you'll need those for activity 2. Pause here to complete the task. So now that we have a basic understanding on how Excel works, we are going to take those 3 graphs and transform them into an infographic. But first, we need to understand our key audiences. Thinking back on Kaz's Week 2 lecture, pick an interesting fact that you want to highlight in your visualization. Before you start designing an infogram, decide on a particular target audience and consider what needs they will have when viewing and interpreting your infographic. For example, if I were to design this infographic for, say, farmers, I would have to consider what is the most important facts they will need to know, which in this case probably would be rain. I would ask myself, is that effectively highlighted? I would assume that they would want to be able to quickly read the infographic. So the design itself needs to be accessible to people who aren't familiar with data visualization. Have a go coming up with your own target audience and needs. You have 15 minutes. Pause here to complete the task. Taking into account the target audience you have defined and their needs, it is now time to design your infographic. Here are some things to consider. When, where will your audience be viewing your infographic? Relating back to the farmer example, they will be probably viewing the infographic remotely and digitally. So I would design for a tablet or phone device. Does your infogram meet their needs? Again, back at the farmer example, is it easy to read? Do they need to have an understanding of how the InfoVis works before they look at it, or is it good to go straight away? Design your InfoVis and infogram for the remainder of the tutorial. Take things into account like color theory, sizing, proportion, Gestalt principles. In studio time, your tutor will facilitate a user testing session where you can test the effectiveness of your visualization. Pause here to complete the task.